On October 18th, 1967, the USSR's Venera 4 spacecraft entered the atmosphere of a planet whose outer atmosphere looked extremely dense. And as Venera slowly descended into the atmosphere, the readings it sent back actually matched their hopes. At about 52 kilometers above the surface, everything looked promising. The probe measured a temperature of about 33 degrees Celsius and a pressure close to 1 psi, conditions that felt almost Earth-like. That was a very positive sign, but as the probe continued falling, the readings turned nightmarish. Venera recorded 262 degrees Celsius and 22 psi, way beyond its limits. Panic broke out in the control room, and then, boom, the probe imploded under the extreme pressure, and that planet was none other than Venus, the second planet from the Sun. Even today, with all our modern technology, landing on Venus is almost impossible. Yet decades ago, Soviet scientists managed to pull off historic missions there with extremely limited technology. How? Well, that's exactly what today's video is about. The Cold War was undoubtedly the fastest progressing era for space science. The USA and the USSR were locked in competition, whether it was the Moon, Mars, or other celestial targets. Each side wanted to achieve something greater than the other. But one of the most fascinating and underrated stories of that race is the exploration of Venus. While NASA's Mariner program launched spacecraft that mostly flew by Venus on their way to Mercury, the Soviet Union set an ambitious goal, not just to fly past Venus, but to land safely on its surface and send back photos and data. The program was named Venera, Russian for Venus. Preparations began in 1961. The first attempts, Venera 1 and 2, were only flybys, but both lost communication soon after launch and failed. Then came Venera 3. This time, the Soviets aimed straight for the surface, but the probe's trajectory went off course, and although they tried to correct it with thrusters, the spacecraft eventually crash-landed on March 1st, 1966. Even so, the USSR proudly claimed it as the first human-made object to make contact with another planet's surface. That alone gave them a significant lead over the USA in the Cold War space race. But they didn't stop there. Venera 4 followed, but as we saw earlier, it imploded before reaching the surface. Later missions, Venera 5 and 6, also failed in mid-descent due to extreme heat and pressure. Scientists realized a major flaw. Once the parachute opened, the probes descended too slowly. That meant they had to endure the extreme conditions for nearly 90 minutes, far too long to survive. But removing the parachute wasn't an option either. Without it, the probe would fall too fast, risking destruction or instability due to Venus's fierce winds. So the question arose, how do you balance descent speed with survival time? The solution came with Venera 7. This probe was built drastically stronger. It was encased in thick titanium walls, filled with shock-absorbing material, and designed to withstand pressures up to 2,600 psi and temperatures up to 580 degrees Celsius. It was much heavier, about 490 kilograms, but that also helped it fall faster, spending less time in the upper atmosphere. Engineers also used an ingenious trick with the parachute. They tied it with a reefing line made from a material that could only withstand 200 degrees Celsius. At first, this line kept the parachute only partially open, allowing the probe to fall faster. Then, as the heat increased, the line melted. About 13 minutes later, the parachute fully deployed, slowing the probe down just in time. The plan was brilliant, but just minutes before touchdown, disaster struck. The parachute tore apart, and Venera 7 crash-landed on the surface. At first, it seemed like total failure. Its antenna had shifted, preventing clear communication. But weeks later, when tapes of the mission were reviewed, a faint signal was discovered. For 23 minutes, Venera 7 had transmitted weak data from the surface of Venus. This was historic. Venera 7 became the first human-made object to transmit data from another planet's surface. The readings were shocking. Surface temperatures around 475 degrees, 25 degrees, and pressures around 1310 psi, -220. This was irrefutable proof that Venus was one of the most hostile environments in the solar system. The Soviets didn't give up. They developed a cooling system using lithium nitrate blocks, a salt-like substance that absorbs enormous amounts of heat as it melts. This kept equipment cooler for longer, giving probes precious extra minutes to operate on Venus. In 1972, Venera 8 landed successfully. For 50 minutes, it transmitted detailed data. Visibility on the surface was similar to Earth's daylight, meaning cameras could work there. Wind speeds near the ground were relatively calm, just 1 meters per second, and scientists now had a proven method to survive the hellish conditions, if only for a short time. With this breakthrough, the stage was set for Venera 9, the first probe designed to capture and transmit actual photos from Venus. Engineers replaced parachutes with aerodynamic brakes, redesigned the lander with a stable, flat platform, and protected its cameras inside pressure vessels with pop-off lens covers. In 1975, Venera 9 succeeded. One of its 2 cameras worked, and it sent back the first ever photographs from the surface of another planet. Over the years, Venera 9 through Venera 14 sent back numerous haunting images of Venus's rocky surface. For the first time, humanity could see another world up close. Venera 14 even recorded rare audio during descent, the eerie sound of landing on Venus. And yet, despite such historic achievements, very few people know about them. Western narratives often highlight NASA's milestones, but the Soviet Union's extraordinary Venus missions remain underappreciated. So the next time you hear about planetary exploration, remember this. Decades ago, with far more limited technology, Soviet scientists managed to land on the deadliest planet in the solar system and send us both pictures and sounds from its surface. That, my friends, is history worth remembering. So, how did you feel when you saw those real images of Venus for the first time? Did they make you emotional or give you goosebumps? Tell me in the comments below.